Thank you for joining us once again. It is, thank God, it's Friday edition of the Morning Call. And currently holding in Beijing, China, is the China-Africa Forum on Defense and Security. The forum, which started in Beijing on Tuesday, June 26th, and is organized by the Chinese Ministry of Defense, aims to strengthen military ties with Africa. It also illustrates the growing influence of China in Africa, including now military ties. According to the Chinese Ministry of Defense, Chinese and African defense officials will exchange in Beijing on topics such as regional security or Sino-African cooperation on security for 15 days. Barbara.
As a reminder, the Chinese army is the third most powerful on the planet after that of the United States and Russia. Since President Xi Jinping came to power, Chinese arms sales in Africa have increased by 55%, according to a Swedish report. China, for example, sells a version of the AK-47, a weapon found in the DRC, Central African Republic, and South Sudan.
Joining us now from Washington, D.C. to provide insight and perspectives on the China-Africa Forum is Calvin Dark, an analyst on Africa and foreign affairs. Calvin, thank you for joining us. First off, China, as we are discussing presently, has opened a 15-day China-Africa Defense Forum. And why is the focus on Africa, Calvin?
Well, I think China is being extremely strategic because they realize that as they try to become a bigger economic power, one way to have leverage around the world is to tie that economic power and influence to peace, security, and defense. And there are many needs across Africa for peacekeeping operations and resolving conflicts. So they're being smart to tie the economics with their security partnerships. And they're also taking advantage of the fact that France, other European countries, and especially the United States aren't focusing as much as they were and as I think they should in Africa.
Calvin, China is a major player in arms sales in Africa, and coupled with the increasing terrorist activities in some parts of the continent, should African countries be worried over this development?
They may not need to be, but they do need to be cautious because all of this increased cooperation and partnership does have potential downsides. What African countries need to remember is that China is a major player and factor in many of the world's most complex challenges, including those with the United States, like North Korea. And what African countries have to keep in mind is that while the partnerships they have with China, economic, security, tourism, whatever it may be, are good with them, it may cause a situation where there comes a day that it puts them at odds with their traditional go-to allies like France, other European countries, and the United States. So I don't think it's a red flag or a deal breaker, but I do think it's something that they have to keep in mind.
You say that you don't think it's a red flag, but what exactly will this growing influence of China in Africa ultimately result to in the nearest future? What do you see it resulting to, Calvin?
Well, I think there are some positive benefits that I do think that economically this will benefit Africa if they make sure that they don't allow China just to exploit natural resources without building the infrastructure and training the local workers to do the jobs. I think it can be negative in the area of democracy and human rights because, you know, the United States and Europe emphasize human rights and democracy and transparency with their partnerships. China is hardly an example of democracy and human rights promotion, so these partnerships could embolden potential human rights violators in Africa who might depend on China turning more of a blind eye than their other allies like the U.S. and Europe.